What is up, Pauper players? Welcome back to another Salt and Pauper Saturday video, and today we have an exciting new brew featuring ya boy Sticker Goblin. He's back, but we're not playing him in Golgotha Red this time. We're doing something different. It is the return of an old, terrifying archetype. Today I give you the return of Turbo Initiative. We're going to be using Sticker Goblin to slay him down turn 1 and turn 2 initiative threats left, right, and center. So let's jump into the deck tech. Let's hit the intro and let's jump into these games. Here we go. Alrighty, welcome to the deck tech of this spicy little deck. We are on a 17 land brew, but only 8 basics. We're looking at a total of 9 non-basic tapped lands. They are the depletion lands. These are really common in Storm brews, but we are running 4 sand. We are running 4 Sandstone Needles, which is the red depletion land. We are running 3 Hickory Woodlots, which are the green depletion land. And we are running 2 Remote Farms that have the white depletion mechanic. 6 mountains, 1 plains, 1 forest. These are mostly just tutorable lands for the initiative, step number 1. But the untapped lands do allow a lot of turn 2 plays and are the core of a lot of our turn 1 plays. We have some fast mana for you. We've got a whole bunch of fast mana. In fact, we have 4 Simian Spirit Guides, 4 Lotus Petals, and 4 Rite of Flames, as well as 1 Seething Song and a full suite of 4, you know him, you love him, name Sticker Goblins. For a small package of removal, we've got a set of 4 Lightning Bolts and a single Journey to Nowhere. For some mana fixing, in addition to the Lotus Petals, we have 4 Mana Morphos, so it plays a little more like a Storm Brew. And then for our payoffs, we have our mono red payoffs, which are going to be our Trailblazer's Torch. We've got 4 of those, a 2 set of Crimson Fleet Commodores. This is going to come into play a lot with like our turn 1, where we don't have mana fixing for our green or white bombs, so we have to play a red bomb. Crimson Fleet Commodore is good for that and starts the Monarch, which can help us draw out of a lot of slow games. And then we have 3 boarding parties. These are going to be our other sources of mono red initiative. Obviously, you can low roll this really hard with those Lotus Petals, Rite of Flames. Even the Simian Spirit Guides don't feel very good. But when you hit the 5 drops for Goliath Paladins or Avenging Hunters, boy, oh boy, do they feel absurd. So, in addition to those, we have our 4 Goliath Paladins and our 4 Avenging Hunters. These are our white and green initiative boys. You should be very familiar with those at this point in Pauper. They're played all over the place. Moving into our sideboard, we have a little bit of a split sideboard here on red and green. We've got 3 Fiery Cannonades. These are going to come in a lot against the Golgotha red lineup. Same with Cast into Fire. You can definitely play this in the Golgotha red matchup. And we've got 4 red Elemental Blast and a single Pyroblast. So 5 blast effects. Use whatever combination you have. These are obviously for mono blue and blue black. And then we have 4 Weather the Storms, which are also good against Golgotha. So you'll see the sideboarding plan is a little bit tricky. Pulling out of the core of the deck feels pretty bad most of the time. So you're left in a situation where, like, you can cut these 5 removal spells pretty easily without hurting your chances or messing with the core of the deck, as it were. But anything larger than that, you run into some real hiccups here as to what you want to cut to make room for your sideboards. And since this plan is pretty uninteractive, outside of the 5 interaction spells, you really don't have a whole lot that's obvious to cut from. Maybe some Crimson Fleet Commodores here and there, but you can't really cut too many of the mono red payoffs because that is going to be the majority of your turn 1 plays. So what are you left with? So oftentimes we're going to be cutting those 5 removal spells for 5 blasts against the blue decks. That's pretty self-explanatory. But against the mono red deck, it's a little bit dicey. You have these 3 Castanifiers that are good against mono red, but also good against Affinity. You have these 3 Fiery Cannonades that are good against things like Elves and Koldatha, and Fairies sometimes, but also are a little bit on the expensive side and usually pretty bad to cascade into. And then you have these 4 Weather the Storms, which are very good against Koldatha and the burn decks, but in general going to be a little difficult and obviously pretty bad to cascade into. So you're left in a little bit of a tricky situation where you have 5 slots to sideboard and you want to bring in, 10 cards in the mono red matchup. So if we run into any mono red matchups today, we will see what we can come up with. It'll really just, I think, be based on the style of mono red deck that they're playing, what we bring in. Against things like the Blast Runner Goblin red, we'll probably not be bringing in these Castanifiers and bringing in more of these Fiery Cannonades. Against the 1-drop red and the Goblin Sticker red, we'll probably be bringing in more of these Cast into Flames, Castanifiers, and the Weather the Storms. But we will see. Let's jump into a couple games, guys. But before we do, make sure you take a look down here and see if you're subscribed, and please consider subscribing to the channel if you're turning in for these weekly videos. It really does help grow the channel and expand who the channel is suggested to, so we grow a little bit more in our Pauper community each and every week. Make sure you drop a comment down below for the algorithm, and like the video if you haven't already, and let's get into some test games with this really sweet Turbo Initiative list. Alrighty guys, we're going to be watching some replays. You guys seem to like the faster paced game content from the Koldatha Red video, so we're going to do that again and see how you guys feel about it for going forward. So make sure you let me know down in the comments if this is a style of video you prefer, or if you like the slower paced style where we can talk out my thought process before each move. I will be doing a little bit more of that than I did last time here though, so hopefully this hits that middle ground for you. This is game number 1 against a Tillarf. We are going to be on the draw, and let's see what our opening hand looks like. Opening hand is pretty good, but we do need to hit a land for it to be online. We do have 16 more land draws. We have 4 Lotus Petals, 4 Simian Spirit Guides, and 4 Rite of Flames, so we do have a lot of draws that hit us +1 mana to really go for it here, and boy oh boy is this an explosive turn 2 if we get one. So we're going to go ahead and keep this hand, and opponent leads on an island, which is not the best for us. If opponent just turn 2 plays an untapped island and pass back, our turn 2 Goblin is really not looking good, especially if we don't have a land to cast it and we have to cast something else. So hopefully they're a little bit more interactive than the other mono blue decks, and we'll see what happens. Opponent does run out of Fairy Miscreant. This is great for us here. It means that they are oftentimes going to be playing a Ninja on turn 2 and not leaving 2 mana up, which is great. Unfortunately, we don't hit the land on the draw, which is a little unfortunate. But we still have one more draw to look at it, and if we don't fall too far behind, we'll be in a good place here. The Fairy Player does hit us for 1. We're not really on a bit of a clock. Oh, just kidding. Fairy Player hits us for 2 because they have a ninjutsu. And we're not really on a ton of a clock here. They replay the Fairy, but we hit the Simian Spirit Guide, and they tapped out. It is time to cue the epic sax music because we are going deep here. Ready, set, go. Let's go for the Goblin. Let's go for the Goblin. Let's go for the Seething Song. And let's Boarding Party. Now, obviously, we hope to hit the initiative creature here because we didn't have one in hand. Not going to do that. We hit a Lightning Bolt. Fortunately, that is enough to clear the way because we have a little bit extra mana. So we're going to Lightning Bolt both creatures, and we're going to swing for 6, putting the opponent to 14. Opponent's going to untap and play this all of one mind because they don't have 2 creatures, which is great for us. We're just going to swing back for 6, play this land we top deck, and put the pressure on the opponent. Opponent at 4 here. They have an Echoing Truth for these Goblins, which is a little unfortunate for us, but no follow-up creature, which is great. They probably have a flash creature here to block, assuming we have a Brine Barrow Intruder or a Spellstutter Sprite coming at us here. So we just attack to make the opponent have it and tap out. They do, in fact, have it, so they're going to block with the Spellstutter Sprite here. And we're just going to go back in with these Goblins and slam down this Crimson Fleet Commodore. And this should seal the deal against the opponent. Not a whole lot they could do here, and they do indeed concede on that game states. All right, starting game number 2 against Atilarf. A little bit heavy-handed on the sideboarding here. We put in all 5 of the blast, but we also dropped 3 of these Trailblazer Torches for 3 Cast-Into-Fires. Obviously, we saw a lot of 1/1s and 2/1s, and they're good against fairies. But they also could be used against something like a Spire Golem if they're on one of the older mono blue lists, which is a good thing to keep in mind. Not sure about cutting the mono red quote-unquote payoffs here in the Trailblazers Torch. May have been a little bit better to cut something like one of each of the colored payoffs just to allow more turn 1 options. But we'll keep an eye on that going forward. We're going to be on the draw here, and this is an absolute dream of a hand. Really do want to hit one of our 5 blasts, though, to really turn on this hand and make sure that we have a safe turn 2 combo. But oh boy, does our turn 2 look good. We'll have 3 mana available, 4 mana available with the Lotus Petal to go for the Sticker Goblin with Blast backup if we need it. And then we can just slam a Commodore, or if they tap out again, we have one of the initiative creatures. So we are loving this hand. This is going to be a snap keep. And opponent is just going to play a land and pass. Now that is a bit unfortunate for us because it means that they're likely not going to be tapping for a turn 2 Ninja. And that means we need to play through counterspells, which definitely impacts the playability of this hand quite a bit. Definitely need to hit a Elemental Blast now. We just lead with the tap land, pass it back, top deck a Boarding Party, which is good here, but not as good as we would like. We'll lead with double Lotus Petal here, just to see if we can get them to counter one. Unfortunately, they don't take the bait. Opponent isn't brain dead, but does set us up for a bit of an awkward board position, because if we go for it here, we sacrifice all of our resources to do so, and not sure we can live through a counterspell. There is some part of me that says maybe we just slam a Boarding Party into the opponent here with 1 more mana source, but we have to resolve a Goblin for that to happen. Opponent just plays a land and passes back once again. We draw a tap land, which is great for us here, though, as long as we keep making land drops so we can get to a point where we have 5 or 6 mana, and we can just go threat, 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 threat. Varying colors, because we have a couple different colors in hand, so that they aren't just always online to Blue Blast. I think we'll be in a pretty good spot. Opponent may have brought out some of their hard counter spells for Blue Blast, which opens the door for these Goliath Paladin Avenging Hunter plays even further. But this is not the time for it, so we're just going to pass back to the opponent here. Opponent just plays another land drop and passes back, which is unfortunate. They really are just slow rolling here on a full hand, which is not the way that we want our opponents to be playing against this deck. If they hold counter spells, there's just not really much we can do. Unfortunately, we don't hit a land drop, so we're going to cycle this Manamorphose and hope to hit a land drop. We do not hit one, so we're going to go for this Crimson Fleet Commodore, which is just our lowest value creature in hand. We suspect they have a counterspell. They do have a Hydroblast. Wisely, they spend it there instead of a hard counterspell, which would have been our preference to open the door for these off-color threats, but not going to happen. Opponent playing this very, very smart. We get to a point now where we miss a land drop, and that's pretty brutal. We're going to get to a point where we have to start discarding here or going for it, which is really unfortunate. We never want to be in this situation against a grip full of blue cards and a bunch of blue untapped lands. Opponent is once again playing it very slow, just passes it back on 5 islands, which is nuts. But committed to the slow game here. We are just going to go for it, which is a little bit loose. But we're just hoping that they let the Sticker Goblin resolve and try to counter the payoff here, which would allow us to rip this Boarding Party and hope to get through a single counterspell. Doesn't happen. Opponent has the counterspell for us. We draw a Rite of Flame. We're just going to discard, which feels awfully bad, but not really much we can do. We can't sacrifice our Sandstone Needle here to go for another rip. We just don't have the resources to back it up, and if opponent has a counterspell, we are just dead in the water, so we have to hold and hope we make more land drops. Unfortunately, opponent just passes it back again with 5 mana up and a full grip of 7 cards, which is brutal. We top deck a Manamorphose, which is, once again, not what we want to see. We want to be hitting land drops here. We're just not. We're going to go ahead and discard this Rite of Flame here. No loss in discarding the first one, so we're not really concerned with that. But we are getting into a position now where we are not able to dig ourselves out if the opponent starts putting on pressure. Unfortunately, that is exactly what the opponent does. Leads with a Fairy Seer and keeps 4 mana untapped. We do hit a Name Sticker Goblin there, which is good for us, but again, opponent just never tapping out, never weakening, never going defenses down, so we just don't have a spot to go for it. We might have to let it rip soon, though, because if opponent starts building pressure, we're going to get behind quick. Opponent plays their 6th land, swings, and most likely ninjas here. Yep, they do ninja. Replays the Fairy Seer, and now we are in a bit of trouble. Opponent has card selection online, and now our emblems are even at risk. Opponent just going to play this Spire Golem and attack through. We're really with our back against the wall now. We may just have to rip and see if we resolve something, but with this many ninjas out, it is a bit hard for us to try to make this work. The writing is kind of on the wall here. We just have to go for it. We go for a Manamorphose, and opponent has the Spell Pierce. We're going to sacrifice to try to hit a land, but opponent has a second Spell Pierce, and we just scoop it up. Really nothing we could have done there. Surprisingly, we might have been okay to just rip the Name Sticker Goblin instead of the Manamorphose, and that could have resolved if opponent's hand was all Spell Pierces, but no way to know. And here we are in game number 3. We've changed the sideboard just a little bit. We took out the Cast and Fires. We brought in the Fiery Cannonades. Saw the opponent go a little bit wide there. Seems like a better plan if they try to go wide on us again. But admittedly, Casting the Fire is better against the Spire Golems. So we'll see what ends up happening. Not sure what the correct play is there. Again, like I said, not 100% sure what the plan is against things like Mono Red or Mono Blue, because there are several cards that are good against them. I suspect that we should probably just bring in the 5 blasts instead of taking out anything additional for like a board wipe or anything like that. But we'll see how game number 3 goes. We are on the play this time. We're going to take the play. And let's see. Our hand is pretty good. We have a turn 1 Name Sticker Goblin, which is great, but we don't have a follow-up, which is a bit sad. We need 1 more land source so this Lotus Petal can make green. If we get 1 more mana source, like a Simian Spirit Guide, a second Rite of Flame, any of that stuff, then these Avenging Hunters can come down on turn 1, which is exactly what we want to do. But we shall see what the draw brings us. Let's see what happens. Turn number 1, we're going to lead this Lotus Petal so it doesn't get Spell Pierced, and then opponent is going to play a land and pass back on us. We do top deck the other land source, but I don't think we're going to have what it takes to pull the trigger here. We have Goblin into Avenging Hunter, but opponent has, the option to have red elemental or blue elemental blast up, which absolutely sinks our hopes and dreams here. And then we have no real follow-up, so I think we just have to pass here and hope we draw a red elemental blast or something in the next couple of turns. That'll open the door for us to go in. Opponent plays a second land and passes the turn. At this point, we just decide that we have to go for it here. Not 100% sure that that's correct, but we're going to keep this Lotus Petal around. We have 2 land drops. It's just a matter of whether or not now is the time. Ultimately, we decide that if we give time to the opponent, they're always going to have it, so we just have to ask the question as soon as possible. Probably should have gone for it last turn. Opponent pump fakes the counterspell. My heart stops just a little bit there. And we get to slam this boarding party. Unfortunately, we hard whiff on this Lotus Petal. But we do get to put the opponent at 14 right away, which is great for us. Opponent lands the Spell Stutter, which says to me they have a ninja. They do, in fact, have a ninja. They're going to draw a card, but we still get to slam them back for another 8, put them at 6. And we do have access to Avenging Hunter the next turn if we need to. We have a couple lines here. Opponent just drew some cards, so not 100% sure that leading into a counterspell is the way we want to do it. But we can definitely just attack in and make them block. We could have Fiery Cannonaded here, which is lethal if they don't have a Blue Elemental Blast or some sort of counterspell, hard counter on 1 for a red spell. But it's probably smarter to just lead into the Avenging Hunter. We attack here to make them block because they have to block if they don't want to get lethaled. And that'll open us up to main phase 2 playing another threat. We get to Avenging Hunter into Avenging Hunter here with the Sandstone Needle. So we're just going to play 1, get the initiative, get a land, play the tapped land, and we can Avenging Hunter again the next turn. But the opponent scoops it up. Wasn't able to stabilize fast enough. So great first match with the deck. Definitely over sideboarded a little bit. I think that some of my turn 1s were weakened because I didn't have the colorless payoffs or the mono red payoffs in those torches. Definitely not going to make that mistake as we go forward in the feature matches. All right, game number 2 against Cynthia. We are on the plate, which is great for us. Let's take a look at our opening hand. This is not a turn 1 Goblin, but it is a turn 2 Goliath Paladin. Turn 2 Goliath Paladin. We've got the Sandstone Needle. We can discard the Simian Spirit Guide to play the Sticker Goblin and still have a Plains, so we guarantee a Goliath Paladin on turn 2. This hand's great. We're going to snap keep this. Opponent also keeps. We lead on the Needle. Opponent plays a blue land, but taps it for the Delver, which is great for us. We top deck the Manamorphose, which is even better. It means that we get to use this Plains to cast the Goblin and save our Simian Spirit Guide. And that's exactly what we do. We find a green, we burn the Delver and pass it back, and opponent is in a very bad position. We're going to go ahead and pump the Goblin here just so that we don't run into like a Snuff Out or a Echoing Truth or a Snap or something like that and be stuck out of threats. So at least this diversifies a little bit. We do end up immediately being rewarded for that because the opponent does indeed have the Snuff Out, but the Goblin still deals 4 there, so we're fine with that, and opponent goes down to 13. They Mental Note and don't like what they see. They mill a Snuff Out and a Spell Pierce, and they scoop it up. No way to recover from that, and next turn they were going down to 5 with the trap, and we have a follow-up on the Torch or the Avenging Hunter. So we're going to game number 2 against what looks like Blue-Black Delver or Blue-Black Terror. All right, game 2 against the Blue-Black Terror list. We took our advice from feature match number 1. We just cut the 5 removal spells for the 5 blasts, and we're going to run it like that. Not trying to be too fancy here. We're just going to run it and hope that we can fight through the counter spells to land more turn 1 initiatives. That was unfortunately a mulligan. But this looks like a much better hand. We can almost turn 1 a boarding party here. If we had an untapped land, we could turn 1 a boarding party. But we'll see how high rolly the Sticker Goblin gets us. If we get the 25% chance for 6, we can still turn 1 the boarding party. So this is a keep. And unfortunately, I throw back the boarding party here. On retrospect, I think that was a mistake. I understand why I did it. The idea was just that if I throw back any of the other cards, I can't do that. And the Crimson Fleet Commodore was the backup plan, so at least I can guarantee that I always play the Crimson Fleet Commodore. But I think in retrospect, I probably should have kept the Cascade and thrown back the Crimson Fleet Commodore, and then instead of turn 1ing the Crimson Fleet Commodore, I turn 2 the Cascade, and I'm on the draw. So if the opponent just keeps 1 blue mana up, I'm in a pretty tough spot for the turn 1 Commodore, but we'll see how it goes. Opponent plays a tap land, though, which is great for us. It means we are absolutely going for it. And we top deck an Avenging Hunter, which means that if we draw another land or, anything like that with the Monarch, we can very quickly hit another threat and start the initiative right after the Monarch. So we're just going to rip it and go for it here, I think. Goblin hits 5, so we couldn't have cascaded there, and we just Crimson Fleet Commodore for the Monarch on turn 1. Opponent has the Snuff Out for the Monarch, which is pretty brutal. But we still do get the Monarch token, which is great for us because opponent has not played a Delver yet. And as long as they don't, I think we're probably going to win this game. We fortunately hit another tap land, which is great. It means that any mana source turns on this Avenging Hunter, and any 2 mana, like a Rite of Flame or anything like that, gives us this boarding party because we've already cast a Rite of Flame. So we're in an absolutely incredible spot as long as we hit 1 more mana source. Just it for 2 here. Opponent spends a turn setting up, which is fine. We're going to get to draw another card. It's not a mana source, but we do untap and top deck the mana source, which is great for us. We're going to make the opponent do something before damage and then try for this Avenging Hunter. It does land, which is fantastic for us. We get another mana source, which is exactly what we want here. And this allows us to boarding party turn 2 if we need to. But opponent scoops it up instead. So great showing. Turn 1 Monarch, getting the job done, and really just absolutely strong showing from this deck. All right, match number 3 against Kuya-Ken TV. We are on the play, which is great for this deck, so we're going to take the play. Unfortunately, we have to mulligan this hand, which is a bit unfortunate, but this is a pretty good hand. Don't have a white source for this Goliath Paladin yet, but we do have a turn 2 Crimson Fleet, and hopefully that is good enough to get the job done. So we'll run it with this. We're going to put back one of these mountains. And opponent just plays an island. Not sure what this visual bug is for MTGO right now, but a lot of the islands and like Lorien revealed and stuff like that don't have image bugs. But that is an island. There it is. And we're going to go ahead and run this Rite of Flame into this turn to Crimson Fleet Commodore. Hopefully we don't run into a Force Spike, but opponent doesn't seem to have it. So we're going to land this Crimson Fleet Commodore with a whole lot of backup. We hit the Manamorphose, which is great for us. It means that this tap land turns into a Goliath Paladin or an Avenging Hunter, whichever one we want. It appears the opponent is on mono blue, either Delver or Tolarian Terror of some sort. We do get a hint, though, because they just milled a Tolarian Terror and a Cryptic Serpent off that last mental note, which was great for us. So we see what they're on. Opponent does play a Tolarian Terror, but we now get to, we have a pretty solid setup here, especially because we just hit another land, so we can kind of chain gun through these initiative sources, and that should snowball this game pretty quickly. We're going to offer the trade here. If opponent takes it, we're perfectly okay with that. If opponent doesn't take it, we still get to play a creature behind here. And if opponent has like a bounce spell or something to get rid of our creature and steal the initiative, we still get to steal it back the next turn. So we should be in a pretty good spot here to rip for the 5-drop. We're going to Manamorphose first just to see what we draw. We hit a Rite of Flame, which is great. Means that we get to save our charge counter on the Hickory Woodlot, so now we can rip both of these initiative threats behind this Goliath Paladin. My thought process for running out Goliath Paladin first is that if I get to forge it and make a 5/8, they can no longer attack with their 5/5s or 6/5s. So that's going to be the line that I choose here. Also, a 3/6 is just good at stonewalling the 5/5s and attacking into the 5/5s, so we're good there. We do execute on the plan of forging this into a 5/8. We hit a name sticker goblin here. Shouldn't have tapped the white source, though. But it runs into a counterspell, so it ends up working out for us. We do just get to attack for 10 here, though. We force the trade, which is fine. Opponent goes to 5, and then they Thought Scour us. Not sure why they were Thought Scouring us. May have been a misclick. They just cast a Deep Analysis and concede game 1 to the Turbo Initiative list. Really, really good showing for this deck. This deck has consistently shown very strong on the play lines. On the draw, it definitely takes us backseat a little bit, but we've closed out a lot of game 2s on a turn 2 initiative or turn 2 Monarch threat. So if our opponents continue to play tap lands or tap out on turn 2 for a development play, we really get to punish those. So let's go to game number 2 against Kuya Ken TV. All right, game number 2 against Kuya Ken. Obviously, we saw mono blue. We respect mono blue. We bring in 5 anti-blue hate pieces, and that is an easy sideboard plan. We are on the draw. Unfortunately, we have to mulligan, which is pretty rough, but this does look like a pretty solid 6 keep. We once again have just shy of a turn 2 Avenging Hunter, so any positive mana draw gets us there, but double Manamorphose is pretty good. Double Sandstone Needle is pretty good. It really unlocks a lot of doors when we have double depletion lands, so we can turn 3 something. But we are going to throw one of the Manamorphoses back. Maybe we should have thrown back one of the Sandstone Needles instead, but opponent leads on a Delver. Not really what we want to see. Opponent flips the Delver. Definitely not what we want to see. Opponent has 1 mana up. Obviously, it could be a blue Elemental Blast. This is game 2, but I think we just have to go for it here. We're going to pay the 2 mana. We're going to Manamorphose. We hit the red Elemental Blast, which is absolutely clutch here. But I think we're just going to pass because now we can ensure our turn 2 or our turn 3 play will resolve. If we go for it here, the red Elemental Blast is dead because we don't have a Simian Spirit Guide or something in hand to use it. So we're going to take this turn off. We're just going to use it to set up. Next turn, we should be able to commit into this Avenging Hunter. And that should close out the game very fast. Opponent misses a land drop here, which is great for us. It means that they can only have, at most, 1 counterspell. They can't have counterspell plus a 1 mana counterspell. And now we get to commit into the Name Sticker Goblin. They do indeed show us the counterspell, but we have the red Elemental Blast to back it up, which is exactly what we needed. The Sticker Goblin lands, and we get to run out one of these initiative threats. I do prefer the Goliath Paladin here for the same reason as last time. My game plan being if I can forge onto this and make a 5/8, all of their threats are stonewalled. We get the basic here, which is good. It means next turn we can play the Commodore, or if we get a +1 mana source, we can play the Avenging Hunter. Opponent attacks and steals back the Secret Entrance to make their land drop, which is fine. After double preordaining, they definitely have a grip of cards. Don't really want to play into another counterspell, though. We're just going to forge up. We are going to split our we're going to diversify our threat range here. A little bit afraid of like an Echoing Decay or a Snap or maybe a Vapor Snag or something from the mono blue opponent. So we commit to both. May have been a misplay. I think maybe committing to the Goliath Paladin to whiff the blue elemental threat outs could have been better, but I have the red Elemental Blast in hand, so I'm not super afraid of a removal spell at this point. We do get to commit the Crimson Fleet Commodore. We just run it out into the blue Elemental Blast. If the opponent has it, the opponent has it. We're still on the offensive, and that would mean they can't kill the Goblin. So we're okay with that trade. But they don't, so we get to start the Monarch, which is great for us. That'll give us an extra card draw, which is the Simian Spirit Guide to actually cast this red Elemental Blast, which is the best top deck we could have asked for. Instant speed, red mana. Now, we do have an interesting point here. We can absolutely go for a red Elemental Blast on this Delver. What does that do for us? Well, it keeps both of our emblems, which might actually be the correct line. However, if they have a counterspell for it, if we go for this red elemental blast and they have a counterspell and they steal both of our emblems, and then say they've got 5 spells in the graveyard, so if they play like 1 more mental note and then double up on bomb threats like Cryptic Serpent, Tolarian Terror, or something, we have to all out attack into it to steal both back, but we lose a threat and all of a sudden our pacing is gone. The game could get out of control because they can then steal the initiative back, forge up on their Delver, and we're on the back foot in terms of life. So I think it's worth it to take the 3 life here and keep the counterspell open in case they have a threat. Let's see how that goes. We're going to give them both the emblems. They do forge the Delver, but then they tap out for a Murmuring Mystic. And because they tap out for a Murmuring Mystic, we're able to red Elemental Blast. They're tapped out and they're dead on board to this trap activation after damage. You can see we have 12 damage here, but they're at 15 life. But once we steal the initiative back, we get to trap them for 5. So they are dead on board here and tapped out. We're just going to swing and GG's from the opponent. All right, guys. So that was Game 3 against Kuyaken TV. The deck has shown an absolute powerhouse. There have been some off matches where the deck just doesn't line up. As you saw in Game 2 of match number 1, sometimes the deck does get a little awkward. You don't hit the land drops. It doesn't line up. But boy, oh boy, when this deck lines up, it feels great. I hope you guys enjoyed the feature matches today. All in all, the deck feels very, very strong. Thank you so much for watching along. And as usual, guys, goodbye forever unless I see you next time. Peace.